This is a preview of the 5K course for the Suburban Conference Cross Country Championship for the St. Louis area. It takes place at McNair Park in St. Charles, Missouri. First, we'll just take an overview of the course. There are some slight changes for 2023, nothing major. It is a multiple loop course, or variations on a loop for the first part of the race. So you can see we start and we go around this field. There's the 1K mark. And then the second time we add to that loop, we're going to go around the starting line. There's the 2K mark. And on our third 1,000, we're going to head up into this baseball field. And there's the 3K mark. And now we're going to do that loop again. And here's the 4K mark. And now we're going to peel off and do some sort of wide hairpin loops as we head toward the finish right there. So that was fast. Let's take a look at each kilometer individually. So it starts in this field. It's a fairly long straightaway, condenses a bit as you head into that first 1,000, right about there. And now we're going to head along this field. We'll look at elevation in a minute, but that's kind of a gradual climb along that field. Now we're circling back toward the start, but we're going to cut across and rejoin the course for the 1K mark right up at the midpoint of that practice football field right there. When we start the 2K, following the same loop, but this time, as we head back down, we're going to loop behind the start, and then along this grove of trees, and now back up along that football field to the 2K mark, which is right there. And you'll notice the 1 mile mark is as we pass behind the starting line in the upper left there. So now we're heading into the 3K. This time we're going to loop out along that baseball outfield and then back in to join the course again. Same thing, heading behind the start, along the grove of trees, and right at the end of that grove is where we'll hit the 3K mark. 4K follows this outer loop again. So at this point you're very familiar with it. Nice thing about multiple loops is it's easy to see the whole course when you get to the park. You'll get familiar with them as you run the first few times. So we hit 4K right there, and you see the 2 mile mark is almost exactly where the 2K mark was on an earlier loop. Now when we start the 5th 1,000, we're going to peel off the course and head to this different section of the park for some wide U-turns along the road, and now we're coming back. This is where a lot of people set up their tents, so this is a pretty crowded area. A lot of spectators, obviously, because we're close to the finish, but also just a lot of closeness because the tents are there. And you can see we finish in that field up there on the left side of the start. A few places that you always want to be aware of when you head to a course. One is obviously just sort of the layout of the course, but landmark-wise, you always want to find that 4K point because that's where you're starting to think about setting up a really solid finish. So that'll be your third time through that section of the course as you start to pass behind the start. That's where you'll hit 4K. Once you peel off, you're going to cross a road over here, and that's where you'll hit the point about 800 meters from the finish is right after you cross that road. And then you'll start those U-turns. 400 meters from the finish is on your way back in after that first loop as you turn to the left. And then 200 meters from the finish is just before your last turn and you head to the finish line. We'll look at elevation in a second, but after that 200 mark, you're going to hit an incline. It's gradual incline up to the finish line. So speaking of which, let's take a look at the elevation profile of this course. So here's a silhouette of it. And just to put some numbers in there, the biggest elevation difference is about 50 feet. You can see also that the finish, that end of that elevation profile, is lower than most of the rest of the course. So this is a net elevation drop as you run through this 5K course. But let's add some distance markers there. There's our kilometers and our miles. And now let's just follow through a kilometer at a time. So you can follow this on the upper map and the elevation map at the same time. And this is where we see we're climbing as we go along the side of that football field. We get to the other side and we're going to drop back down to that grove of trees there, and then cut across, climbing again on this side of the football field to the 1K mark. And now the 2K, we're going to see some very similar elevation profiles. dropping down off of that football field, continuing down as we pass behind the start, and now climbing as we hit that field up to the 2K mark right there. Continuing that gradual climb. When we head to that baseball outfield, that's going to be very flat. And then we come back in, join the original course, and we're dropping back down. When we pass behind the start, we're hitting the low point of the course, elevation-wise. There's 3K right at the end of those trees. Climbing again along the football field. Then we hit the flat as we go out along that outfield of the baseball field, dropping back down toward the starting line for 4K. And then when we peel off and cross that road, we really do drop in elevation, climb up to the road, and then those hairpins are gradually downhill the whole way as we loop back and forth. We're about 200 meters from the finish. We start to climb as we head into the finish line. So there's your elevation profile of the course. A few places just to be aware of, just as you know, because it's a loop, we can look for these patterns anytime we're passing through here. So I just highlighted in green, that's really the lowest part of the course. So we pass through those sections at these 3 points multiple times in loops. So that middle cutoff there in the first loop, and then anything behind the start and along that grove of trees, we're looking at our low points in the course. So anytime you're headed toward there, you're headed downhill. Anytime you're moving away, you're headed uphill. But overall, this is a very flat course. So even the uphills are very gradual uphills. And then we mentioned this, that outer section of the course, the 5,000, is lower in elevation than the rest of the course. So really, once you peel off and head to that new section, you climb up to the road and then you're headed downhill gradually until you get close to the finish, and then it's an uphill climb. Just focus on the finish line when you get to that last part. So that is a look at the 5K course at McNair Park. There are a lot of PRs at this course. I think it's a great course. It's really well laid out. It's relatively flat. So that, combined with the point at which we are in the season, we are ready for some fast times and some great racing at McNair Park. I hope you have a great race.